All right. I know we will still likely have some folks who are wrapping up their lunch coming in at the back of the room, but we will slowly get started. Thank you everyone. And I hope everyone who joined us this morning was able to have some good takeaways from the morning sessions, maybe do a bit of networking at lunch, and hopefully have some ideas that you can take into your teaching in the fall. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our plenary session for the Teaching Development Conference. And when thinking about our theme today of centering wellness and inclusion and well-being into our classrooms, even when we're teaching in times of change, I started to try to think about faculty on campus that we know are grappling with some of the same challenges and changes that you all might be facing. So thinking about the impacts of emerging technologies like generative AI, larger courses, thinking about all of the changes in who our students are that are coming into our classrooms. But the faculty that are still bringing enthusiasm and passion into their teaching and into their classrooms. This type of energy and enthusiasm is infectious, and I think it spreads excitement and hope to all of us as we embark on our journeys as educators, wherever you may be going on that journey. I know that all of you who get to work with our keynote speaker or have met her before, students, staff, or faculty alike, would also mention the infectious energy that she brings in all that she does. It's my immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Meghan Norris as today's keynote speaker. Dr. Norris is an associate professor and chair of the undergrad studies in the Department of Psychology at Queen's. A social and personality psychologist by training, Dr. Norris works in areas of attitude change, consumer psychology, and applied psychological science to facilitate learning in the post-secondary space. Not only are you an amazing psychologist, but teacher. And 2023 alone, you received the Canadian Psychological Association's Award for Distinguished Contributions to Education and Training in Psychology, and the Principal's Teaching Award here at Queen's for Educational Leadership. Woohoo! I think that Dr. Norris combines the qualities of a successful academic scholar, an educational leader at Queen's, and in your discipline, as well as someone committed to student success. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our plenary speaker, Dr. Meghan Norris.
Thank you so much. Is that okay is that too loud? No, that's good? Okay. I will say I have been so honored and it's so kind to receive recognition, but you'll see today, and I'll talk about it throughout, I do nothing alone, and I only do anything because I really work with the most incredible students, staff, faculty, friends. We really are in this all together. You'll hear me say it in the talk. I always say teamwork makes the dream work. I have the wrong water bottle. A student had a sticker made. And there's some Easter eggs apparently across campus that make fun of me. So if you see teamwork makes the dream work, it's somebody who was making fun of me. So I accept that with honor. I will say I do have closed captioning up here. It's not perfect. I'm from Halifax, and sometimes I speak in Halifax, and I apologize. You can see it struggles with my accent as we talk about technology. I have a friend who says that academics can't do anything without caveats beforehand. And although I'd like to prove him wrong, he's totally right. So in today's talk, we had talked about what I was going to cover, and I felt like I could cover a bazillion different things in depth, but I made the unwise decision of trying to cover a lot of things at surface levels to hopefully maybe plant some seeds and get across content that maybe you haven't heard that I think is really important. I also was really thinking about this talk. I was just in Halifax, and if you know about the fires, they're really bad right now. And so I was thinking about firefighters and what we do to prepare firefighters, and I was specifically thinking about volunteer firefighters before we send them into the field. And there's actually a ton of really detailed training that goes in to prepping people to go into a challenging situation. An amazing thing about teaching is ideally we're not risking our lives, and it's actually really fun. We are so privileged to get to do what we do. So I'm actually going to take that for granted in this talk a little bit. I'll give nods to it, but I'm going to assume that we are all in this room because we love teaching, we love working with students, we're committed to our disciplines. And I'm going to focus a little bit more in terms on preparing for when things get a little bit challenging. So, the vision, the TLDR, as my students would say. Higher education really, really matters. There are likely way more students than there are you. In my case, in Psych 100, I have 2,000 students, and it's me, with a huge team of TAs. But even with a huge team of TAs, we are very much outnumbered. I'm gonna hope to provide really honest, authentic, sometimes vulnerable insight today to how to equip yourself for the many for sustainable teaching. My hope is that people go into teaching and they live happy careers until retirement when they choose to do so because retirement sounds amazing. And as I talk, not all tips I share are gonna work for everybody. I'm gonna share cringe moments where you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, Megan, and that's okay. Know yourself, know your students. You all have professional judgment and I trust you to use it. So with that, let's talk about donning our own masks. I want to do just a quick check to see who's in the room. I invite you to put your hand up for a quick second if you are about to teach your very first class. Yeah, we got lots, great. If you're not currently teaching, but you're supporting the educational mission in other ways. Yeah, awesome. If you've been teaching less than 5 years. Okay. If you've been teaching more than 5 years, less than 10. And then our vets, do we have anybody in here who's been teaching more than 10 years? Yeah, don't worry, I'm gonna be talking to everybody in this room. This talk applies to everybody, and our veterans, I'm gonna lecture you a little bit. So today I'm gonna talk a bit about me. I'm really gonna position myself because I think it's important for this talk. I'm gonna be talking a bit about IO psychology, innovation, and then we'll wrap this up. I think it's important to share a bit about me because it's gonna contextualize the rest of the talk. So as Carolyn said, I am trained as a social personality psychologist. My first job was actually in consumer science at Purdue University. It was really cool. I was working on consumer adoption of smart grid technology. How do we empower individuals when they go into for-profit healthcare contexts? So it was really focused on empowering individuals in consumer-based contexts. I loved it. We innovated there. I got to work with companies like GE. I was working with energy companies, and it was so fun. But, especially those of you new in your journey, I hit my real first big plot twist. And I will overshare here because I think people don't often do this. So I had an infant in the States. There was a school shooting where a student came in and shot and killed their TA while I had my 5-week-old baby on campus. And then I got a call that my dad had terminal cancer. So here's me, straight through to grad school, A+, Shook funded, yeah! Great, Big 10 job. And I had this huge plot twist in front of me that was really personal. And so I had to take some time and figure out what I was gonna do. I picked up, I had no job with my partner at the time, and we moved back to Canada. We moved back to Halifax so I could be with my family at a really tough time. And I realized that my training and my experience from Purdue meant I could innovate. I could run a budget. I ran a lab. I had all of these generalizable skills. So I started a consulting company. And I loved it. It was so much fun. I planned to stay there forever. I really love the ocean. My mom makes really good lasagna. I was happy in Halifax. And then somebody reached out to me about this job. And I had no intentions of taking it. Or even being offered it. I came for the interview. Let me tell you, for those of you who own a house, I had just built my dream deck. It had, the storage underneath this deck was like amazing. I wasn't gonna move. But I came, and within 6 weeks, I was up and moving back to Kingston. right? Plot twists happen. So I want to encourage you as you go through your career, especially as you're in the beginning stages when those plot twists feel really big because we don't have enough sample size, they happen. I want to normalize them. If you look at our veterans around here, they're all going to tell you they've hit more than one plot twist. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's kind of a bit about me in terms of how I come to things. I actually love the plot twists now. I'm like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Sometimes I'm like, okay, enough has happened, but you know. I also very, very much so believe in teamwork makes the dream work. My pre-academic background is in high-performance sport. I both competed and coached at the Canada Games. And so I'm used to being in an environment with very highly trained, skilled people who got to where they are because they are competitive in a tight market. And once they get to me, they can't be competitive with each other anymore. That doesn't help the team. And so for me, that really translates into post-secondary because we all come from competitive backgrounds. But once we are here in this room together, we are now on a team and it's time to gel so that we can work together. And you're going to hear me say this a million times today. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but higher education matters. I've even said this at CTL Talks before, but I'm going to go through it again. Many of us know that higher education can be associated with higher income. Higher education is associated with people being happier with the jobs, and that's all great. Yeah, career stuff. I love it. If you know my work, I've done a lot of work in this space. I think that's great. But people who have higher levels of education and income are associated with longer lives, more time spent in good health. We've got increased likelihood to vote, increased rates of volunteering, charitable giving, increased rates of blood donation. Post-secondary institutions play a very critical role in terms of Canadian research and development, R&D landscape. Campuses provide community access to libraries, talks. I love it. We have kids come to campus to play basketball tournaments in our space. We really are a community hub. And colleges and universities are important sources of economic contributions to our communities. And that's just a snapshot. What you do in these classrooms and supporting these classrooms matter. My personal philosophy, therefore, is the more students we can serve, the better. And the more boundaries we can break down to get folks into our classroom and get them high quality content, the better. And we're at a bit of an inflection point. Student needs are changing. Even for our folks who have only been teaching 5 years, we have major shifts in terms of student needs in the classroom. So I've taken this from the recent review of student academic accommodations and considerations here at Queen's. 20% of youth self-identified as having a disability, up 7% from 2017. 68% of those are mental health, 46% learning related, 34% pain related. The number of students registered with student disability offices in Ontario increased by 32% over the last 5 years. Instructors, things have changed. What we need to give our students to help reach all of those important outcomes has changed. And we don't really have a change in the resources. Okay. Ontario universities receive the lowest per student funding in Canada. We are at a disadvantage out of the gate. The 10% tuition cut in 2019 and the ongoing freeze has reduced the value of tuition by about 30%. And it's declining. Real student per student operating funding, placing education programs and services students rely on at risk. Student needs up, funding down, and this is the part I really love, is demand is up. People see the value of higher education, but we've got a real tough math formula to solve here. For thriving post-secondary, I'm going to argue, as a social psychologist, that we need a healthy workforce. Faculty, staff, and students have roughly equivalent rates of depression, anxiety, and stress. We talk a lot about student need, and it is critical because we're student-centered. But we can't be student-centered if we don't also look at us as a team. Many of you have heard about burnout, and I do want to introduce this as a concept. Burnout, we call it the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases. Burnout is classified as an occupational phenomenon. It is not a medical condition. Burnout's a symptom conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. That doesn't mean it's an individual issue, but it's characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. We have a challenge with burnout in academic staff. This is UK data, and it's pretty old now. This is a really understudied area. If I'm being honest, I was shocked. In 2003, 93% of members suffered from work-related stress. 62% reported excessive strain. 27% seriously considered a career change. 46% reported a moral worsening over the last 2 years. And 86% felt their workload was too heavy. I thought it was really interesting. In 2023, burnout in academia was argued as a threat to the SDGs related to good health, well-being, and decent work life. Don't worry, this is going to get hopeful and optimistic. I'm going to come to it. There's even a slide with puppies, don't worry. So we've got significant reduced funding. Students are eager to come to post-secondary. Student needs are changing. We've got a burnout challenge. And higher education matters. There's the puppies. It doesn't help us if we send firefighters in without an understanding of what the challenges are. We are not alone. Lots of sectors struggle. Burnout is like, let's go talk to our friends down at KGH, right? This is not a new phenomenon we need to talk about. We've got lots of research. My hope is that I can plant some seeds to, again, hopefully get to some sustainable outcomes in the long run. Again, my goal is everybody in here has thriving careers in classrooms and the resources to adapt to things that change quickly. Again, this is so much easier said than done, and I hear it. I hope that we build a sense of collegiality as we move forward. Okay, a model I want to provide you with, because I think it applies to pretty much anything, because it's so general, you know, the strengths and weaknesses of different models. This is the job demands resources model, which is very common in IO, industrial organizational psychology. And it talks about work performance, and I'm going to talk about our classroom performance as instructors here, as really fundamentally coming from a balance between job demands and job resources. And it's important to know that job demands, we talk about work pressure, we can talk about emotional demands if we're doing a lot of emotional labor, but there's also work-life balance stuff, right? Like my kid is starting middle school, and I don't know if anybody's done that transition, but nobody warned me. It's a lot. But there's buffers like collegial support really matters, that whole team thing, team cohesion, harmony, autonomy, coaching, peer coaching, being able to go in and close the door and be like, oh my goodness, supervisor support, and having that trust. We can think about all of our individual contexts and map out what might be helping or hurting at any one given point to think about where resources can come in. I also want us to, as we think about burnout, think about something that has been updated to be called empathic strain. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the term compassion fatigue. There's lots of discussions happening that compassion doesn't fatigue. Compassion is actually something that we have in us, that we feel, but empathizing, putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody else, again and again, especially in a large course when you have lots of students experiencing lots of really challenging things, that can really fatigue. It's actually kind of cool. There were studies done where they did empathy training and compassion training. Empathy training actually activated pain centers in the brain where compassion training did not. So I think we need to be aware that as student needs are increasing, that student contact is increasing, we see barriers for students. I'm sure for those veterans in the room, we've all been in a situation where we're like, this is a barrier and I don't even know how to get around it, right? Empathic strain is real. So again, higher education matters. As instructors, we have a responsibility to ensure that we have the capacity to deliver a successful course based on our resources and demands within contracted obligations. And for those veterans in the room, I really want to argue that we have a responsibility to uphold our own boundaries to model some healthy working behavior, especially in challenging times. We are all works in progress. We all for folks who haven't taught your first class, don't put yourself in this situation, but we've all been up late trying to finish a lecture. We've all kind of made choices where we're grading late at night, and that happens, but we don't want that to be the norm. Because when that starts to be the norm, that's when we start to get burnout and empathic fatigue really kicking in. So what helps? This is where I'm gonna dabble between actual scholarship and anecdote here. Certainly being aware can help, right? I don't love this in terms of academia in our current context, to be honest, because part of me is like, yeah, I know the problem, I just can't fix it. So it's good to be aware because sometimes you can fix it, but also recognizing that there's limits there. The more evidence-based approach is find something, anything you can control. Actually in nursing homes, there's work done that control over a plant, so giving somebody a plant and having control over watering it and growing that plant actually has a lot of really positive outcomes. If you ever come to my office, you'll see it's now full of plants. As a joke for that study. I know, it's funny. Thank you, I appreciate that. But you can control things in many ways. So maybe it's schedule. If you are not a morning person and you have flexibility to start at 11 rather than starting at 9, take that flexibility. If you have control over activities you're doing, if you have boundaries you can put around your email. I took my email off my professional phone, or my personal phone, and I got a work phone, and I don't take my work phone if I'm going to do fun things. It's like wild. Hopefully new people in the room are like, you took your email with you everywhere? Yeah, it's whack, don't do that. And then we have opportunities to build systems. So let me give you some more vulnerable examples. I'm the undergraduate chair in psychology, so in addition to being the person who oversees Psych 100 with 2,000 students, I actually oversee the entire undergraduate program in psychology. We're one of the biggest undergraduate programs on campus, if not the biggest program. I have a very high volume of email. I have a very high volume of repeated questions, especially in courses. I have a high degree of disruption. So people like, Megan. I have high volume of issues with urgency. And I have high volume of situations with a lot of emotion, often stress, sometimes parents calling. So here are some strategies in case they are helpful for you that I use. Some of these I've stolen from colleagues, but I want to give you some ideas. And this is where you may be like, I'm not going to do that. That's terrible. Cool, don't do it. But think about what might work for you. So for me, high volume of email. I have an away message, and my undergraduate assistant has a very clear away message that we do not respond to emails on evenings and weekends. So one of the things that we were finding is that we'd come in and there were like 18 emails from one student who was expecting a response overnight. And so by clearly communicating that boundary, actually we were like, oh wow, it actually really helped, and we could more effectively then jump in to help without that empathic strain of like, oh my goodness, there's 18 emails here. For email, your triage skills will improve over time. I remember when I first started, I was like, this is an impossible task. And some days it is, but you will get better. I just want to let you know, if you're feeling overwhelmed with email, this is a practice skill, it will get better. I'm very fortunate in my role. I have channels for delegation. I have head TA in Psych 100 as an example, where I can say all of these questions are going to go to this person, all of these questions are going to go to this person, which leaves me free for the questions that need me. I also often remind myself of the principal's disconnect from work policy. There is a formal policy at Queen's about the right to disconnect from work. And I think this is really important because it sets the norm from the institution. You know, I don't know about you, often I feel like this internal pressure that I need to get back to people. No, you don't. I mean, ultimately you do, like, but not right away, right? We can manage our time, and sometimes it's better to wait until you're not hungry and cranky to respond to that email. You have a right to disconnect from work. For high volume of repeated questions, I absolutely have templated email responses. And I might tweak them a little bit, usually I do, to meet the specific need. But if you find yourself writing out an answer more than once, so you write it out a second time, copy and paste that email, throw it into a Word document or wherever you want to throw it. Sometimes I use Excel because you have tabs so you can search more easily. Save yourself that headache, because the empathic strain of answering the same question 60 times is enough to make you want to pull your hair out. And I'm not saying that because the students deserve the same amount of care and compassion as the first time, but honestly, I can only handle so much for a missed assignment with 2,000 students, right? I am human. High disruption, I actually love this part of my job, I'll be honest. I kind of have fun when it's like, oh, no problem, oh, no problem. We can talk about that at a different talk. But sometimes I do need to do deep work. And I really do need to get deep into a spreadsheet or deep into a problem. And the cost of task switching, we know is really hard, like it's bad. So many of us, myself included, I'm like, I'm a great tasker. Research does not support that. Even if we feel like we are not good at switching attention and jumping from task to task. There are costs. So when I'm working on something that really needs my careful attention, I will close my door, and I like to have an open door policy, so it really bothers me. So usually, like for my own self, I make like a funny note. I'll write like D&D, where my veterans will be like, oh, that's like from ICQ, do not disturb. And then some students are like, Dungeons and Dragons. And so like, I'll like lean into it, like, uh-oh, D&D. Did anybody get that reference? Yeah. So you can do things like that to let people know, like, you're not mean, you're not slamming the door, you just really need to focus, and that's okay. Sometimes I also will work from home or another office on campus or another location. I hate to share this, but I feel like it's wrong to keep it to myself. Over in the Isabel, up on the second or third floor, oh yeah, some people know about it. There's this beautiful room with like, I gotta tell them, floor to ceiling windows, you can go in and you can work. It's like the best place ever. I use it for something I call Right Club, and I'm like, we don't talk about Right Club. For those who don't know, there's a reference, we don't talk about Fight Club. We don't talk about Right Club. Okay. High volume of urgency. I block my calendar times. This is something I learned from a colleague at Purdue, actually, and I thought it sounded like so terrible at the time. I was like, oh no, this is the way. I absolutely, if I know I need to do something, I have time blocked on my calendar for grading. I have time blocked on my calendar for student meetings. I have time blocked on my calendar for email. You need to, otherwise other people will take control of your calendar. And the nice thing about that is, too, it gives you a little bit of flexibility. So if I get a call and it's like, hey, Megan, I really need to talk to you, but your calendar's full, I can go in and then be a little bit more strategic about where I'm going to fit that in. I also personally have no meetings Mondays, because Mondays, usually weekends, are when high urgency issues come in. So I need time on Mondays to sort through things. So I just block it, and for myself, I have to practice upholding that boundary. I teach on Mondays this year, so I don't know how that's going to work, but I'll cross that bridge next week. I also block 4 p.m. onwards. Again, these times might not work for you, but for me, I want to make sure I have protected time so that if there's an emergency, I can make sure at the very least I tell people I see this and I'm on it, so that they know and it's been received and acknowledged. But again, remember work life on that JDR model. I also have kids, and if you don't pick up kids by the time aftercare closes, like, it's like $1 a minute. It gets pretty intense. So I do that to help balance urgent needs at work and then also getting to my kids. In terms of high volume situations with a lot of emotion, again, this is really personal. I have an unshakable commitment to quiet time and exercise before I come to work. Part of it is I was a rower, so I'm up early naturally. I'm not saying everybody should get up early. I get up at 5 every morning, and I do not look at work. I have coffee. My coffee machine turns on by itself. This is like a special treat for me. And I do Wordle, and I get my exercise in, and I play with my dogs, and that is like non-negotiable. That is non-negotiable for me. I also have an unshakable commitment to prioritizing sleep hygiene. So I laugh, a close colleague of mine is a night owl, and I'm up early, and so sometimes we cross over in the 5 a.m. hours, but like she'll send me like an email at 9, it's not happening. I am off at that time, no matter how much. So for me, sleep hygiene is a critical. Also, in a high emotion moment, for those of you, some of you are in roles where you have this a lot more maybe than others, very rarely does a decision need to be made right now. At the minimum, you can say, I'm gonna just run to the washroom. I just need to take 5 minutes and run to the washroom. Ideally, you can say, you know what, this is really important to me. I wanna just take the night to think about it, or however much time that you need. That's absolutely okay to do. And I would argue it should be done. Taking a break can lead to better decisions. Indeed, many of you will know, because back in the Twitter days, I do lunch walks along the water. I've got to get out of my office. I'm not always good at this. This is a work in progress. But my personal mission by the time I retire from Queen's is that I'm going to see so many colleagues out walking along the water, because we do better with breaks. You are in an industry that is sometimes referred to as knowledge work. What we do requires a lot of cognitive effort. We are not computers, nor do we want to be. We have specialized theoretical and analytical knowledge. We often are working in high task ambiguity. That's where we should be, right? I don't know what the obvious answer is here. That's what we do. Problem solving is needed. We also often have the benefit of a flexible work schedule. We also tend to be those people who invested in terms of training, and we care a lot. And y'all, we are so bad at taking breaks. We are so bad at it. We even kind of trick ourselves. So in one study, less than 50% of managers thought work breaks could improve their own performance. So we've got people who are making decisions, not taking breaks. This is where my students would say, cool flex, bro. Breaks matter. I think a lot also about vulnerable faculty. Generally, junior female faculty especially are doing a lot more emotional labor work in their classes, and women also report not having enough work breaks as stress-related factor. So go for your lunch walks. Then oftentimes when we talk about breaks, people get into, well, which type of break? What break's the best break? And it kind of doesn't matter as long as you choose it and it's something that you want to do. Generally, short breaks, especially in the afternoon, can be helpful, but again, this varies. Phoning friends, texting, stretching, daydreaming, these are all fine things to do. Generally, green space, getting outdoors is better than sitting at your desk, but again, if all you got is 5 minutes and you just want to finish that Wordle, go for it. Overwhelmingly, people are reporting engaging in social media as a break activity, 97%. And this is okay. Like, I'm not going to slam social media here. If you want to scroll, that's okay. It's generally not as strong as walking or even napping, like a 15-minute nap. But it's okay. Whatever you need to do. Generally, regular exercise, and I'm not talking like going for runs along the water, like short bouts of movement, but consistent over time. In this room, I'll share this example because I think you'll all get it. I often talk in Psych 100 about learning burpees, because students in Psych 100 often try or may be tempted to cram a whole lot of content in a short amount of time. And I say, what do you think is going to be better for exercise? Doing 800 burpees in one day or doing a couple consistently over time. If you do 800 burpees in one day, you will be in pain and you will probably never do another one again. So small bouts, consistent over time, those small but consistent actions. But again, really just do what you want and have control over it. So if your employer is saying you must go for a walk, it's probably not going to be the benefits that we want. So if you care about doing good work, schedule breaks and then respect them. In academia, I find boundaries are really, 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 really hard because most of my best friends are my colleagues, right? And so I'll get a text and it's like, hey, Megan, can we just like work through this thing? I know it's lunch. And I'm always the person to be like, yeah, I'll totally do it. And that is totally not what I should do. So we need to practice supporting our colleagues as they put some intentional boundaries into place. And that's for us too. So I tend to be, again, I think I'm really a helpful person. I care about my job. And so I'll throw a text to a friend. Like, no, I've really tried to stop texting my friends about work and I'll send it to an email instead. And then keep the text for like the hot gossip. Okay, so a quick checkpoint. Higher education matters. Y'all are here because you also love it. We are at a tough point as a sector. We've got reduced resources, increased demand. We've got signs of burnout and empathic fatigue and empathic strain in our community. And we talked a bit about some personal anecdotes about things that we can do. I'm going to transition us into hopefully a bit more of a motivational side of things. I have this great colleague, some of you probably know him, Steve Jordans. He just did a talk with us last week about generative AI, and he presented this model, and I'm stealing it from him. So he's talking about the Kuhn cycle, which generally is talked about in scientific models, generally about we've got science happening, suddenly there's all this like new stuff, and maybe our frameworks don't account for it. We throw our models into crisis because suddenly we got all this data we can't explain and nothing really fits. We've got model revolution and then a paradigm change. Right now, Steve and now me also argue we are at a point of model crisis and we need to push through to model revolution. I asked ChatGPT, as we think about crisis and revolution, to make me an inspirational picture that encourages instructors in higher education to engage in innovation. And this is what we've got. Great use of carbon, I'm sure. And I'm going to give one example of how we've done this related to accessibility and psychology. So, like I talked about at the outset, rates of accommodations are going up. This has a substantial impact on workload on instructors. Email volume's up, empathic strain is up because we care about our students. And we have a lot of students with varied needs. And all of these needs are important. And one thing that's hard for students to sometimes see is that, yes, this is important, and there's hundreds of you, and how can I manage that in a way that is student-centered, responsive, caring, in line with our mandate, and good. In terms of teaching, we've got a real challenge because depending on the nature of disability, we've got increased rates. Disability tends to be episodic. So for example, a Crohn's flare isn't consistent. Sometimes it's associated with stress, which is associated with assessment. But oh my goodness, good pedagogy means we're assessing more often. There's more opportunities for students to miss work. So we've got a real tension between supporting needs and good pedagogy. Okay. So again, psychology, huge program, huge classes, one person on the end of an email with students who need a lot of support appropriately. We had instructors who were really struggling. You might be surprised to learn. in psychology, we really care about these types of things. And so if we feel like we're not responding in good ways, that's even higher empathic strain, maybe. And so we wanted to do some intentional consideration about the demands and resources. We need to be real. If we have firefighters running into the fire, we have to be real to get it right. And we have to be compassionate for our students. We're not dragging people out of the building, ideally. We're taking them out with care. For those of you who are just teaching your first class, you may be aware we have requirements for what we have to achieve in our undergraduate programming. And there's a new Queen's one here, it's not updated, don't tell Dale. But we call them the UDLs, undergraduate degree level expectations. Nested under these ministry provided guidelines, we have program level learning outcomes. So every department with every program has these learning outcomes tied to the degree. Then, nested within that, every course has course level learning outcomes that you're gonna achieve in your course. If you don't have these and you're about to teach your first course, it's absolutely appropriate to ask your undergrad chair for these. It can be really helpful, so you can be like, oh, this is what I want to achieve. Once you've got a good sense of the outcomes you need to achieve across those 3 levels, then you start thinking about your course design. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'm happy to share the slides so folks have it. In terms of arts and science, an undergraduate course is expected to have 120 learning hours. So that's about 10 hours a week. So when I'm laying out my course, I'm thinking about, okay, I've got 10 hours a week. What's that going to look like? How much is too much versus not enough? There's some really great estimators out there in terms of how many pages is appropriate for different levels of readers. And then I start to build my course. Depending on your course and depending on the assessments you choose, there's many ways to accommodate, and that best way might vary, right? We can design those assessments and think before our classes even start about how we might improve access for a whole range of reasons. So let's just take a quick thought exercise. I'm going to ask folks to shout out here, especially our experienced folks. 3 scenarios. A student needs extra time, but the feedback's already going to be provided. So submitting late is kind of an issue because the answer key's already out there. Maybe a student has challenges related to grammar and spelling, but it's considered an essential requirement. Or maybe a student's not able to do an oral presentation in a seminar course, but that oral presentation is an essential requirement. Does anyone want to pick one and throw out just a potential way we could address? Yeah. Beautiful. For an oral presentation, maybe instead do a one-on-one. Great. Other thoughts?
Teach the student how to use Grammarly.com and teach them how to use it sparingly.
Yeah, teach students about Grammarly.com or other tools and how to use them in professionally appropriate ways. Yeah? Yeah?
For the extra time one, it's possible you could design 2 assignments, one of which could be used for under 15 people. It's not going to be just one who needs extra time, so you
Yeah.
can say, okay, you could do it this way.
Great. For extra time, there's often more than one student, especially in a large course, who needs it. So maybe you're going to make 2 versions of the assignment so that if you have students who are going to submit late, yeah. There's lots of ideas we can have here. For a talk, you could also do, maybe somebody's going to videotape it and do it that way. Maybe somebody can't do an oral presentation because they have damage to their vocal cords. So maybe we have to be even more creative. Thinking about these in advance and priming ourselves to think through ideas at a time when we're less busy, we're not in the throes of exams right now, we have a little bit less burdens to be a little bit more creative in terms of what we come up with. Thinking about accessibility out of the gate does not have to be fancy. I said cool flex, bro, and this was a real moment for me. I was at a talk. My memory is fuzzy here. I don't think it was me giving the talk, but it could have been. 10 years ago, if you were in my classroom, I would say, I don't need a mic. I'm really loud. True, I'm really loud, but I also need a mic. And so the person who was giving the presentation was like, I don't need a mic, I'm really loud. And somebody from the back yelled, cool flex, bro. I was like, that's right. It's not about the instructor. It's not about the person up at the front of the room. It's at the person at the back who doesn't want to be screamed at the whole time, right? So cool flex, bro, just do the thing. One that we talk a lot about in my advanced seminar course about teaching and learning is red-green color blindness. 10% of the population is red-green colorblind, but almost every talk I go to, it feels like people are using red-green on graphs. Just by changing your color palette, you can include 10% of the population who has been excluded. Something I've recently learned is, in syllabi when you lay out your, you put in your little table and you put out your readings in week 1, week 2. Screen readers don't do great with that unless you use the actual table feature in the program. Because when you use the actual table feature, it'll read the headings for them as headings as opposed to like a nonsense order. Check your graphics with screen readers if you have a chance. Update your alt text. When I go back and I look at alt text I wrote 5 years ago, and I'm like, whoa, I did not understand what would be helpful here for alt text at all. Give yourself that space to grow. Some work I did was really on whether we need documentation for missed tests in my case. There was a situation in Psych 100 where we used to always require documentation to be able to reweight a quiz to a test. And we just couldn't handle the volume. And everybody was like, Megan, you got to stop. So I was like, okay, I'll stop, but I'm going to measure the rates of attendance. And I bet when I don't require documentation, I'm going to have a huge no-show rate for this quiz. So I measured it. And I was wrong. I had the exact same rates of attendance, and I've had the exact same rates of attendance ever since I've started this. So sometimes we got to check our own biases, and as an empirical scientist, I'm like, let's collect the data so that we're not relying on our gut instinct, because we're not always right. Importantly, in accessibility education work, there's this talk about +1, and I really love it. We're a week out. I can't go fix all of my alt text, some of which is still terrible, but I can do something. And by just doing one thing consistently, one burpee consistently, we can make a real big difference. So by just getting rid of that documentation that I've convinced myself I don't need based on data and careful evaluation, I've reduced demand over at QSAS. I've reduced stress on our healthcare system, stress on our students, and there's been no change to my classroom. Cool, right? The term, for those of you who have not taught, I think a lot about accountants, right? Like accountants right now are probably super bored, but come April, accountants are not having fun. The same is going to be true for us in the classroom and supporting classrooms. Even the first week of class, I mean, it's excitement, but it's not midterms, and it's not finals, right? The volume gets high, we get hungry, we get tired, we get cranky. I get hungry, tired, and cranky. Compassion doesn't go away, but oh my gosh, when it's exam time and a lot of students are struggling with a lot of different things, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. We've got illness, we've got homesickness, we've got unrecognized needs for accommodation and students who can't get to providers to get the documentation needed, a laptop broke, a friend's in the hospital. These all matter and are important, and we are one person and they are many. By thinking in advance, we can help mobilize resources, but we have to be real and compassionate. I'm going to show you what we built in psychology. This is open access. It's in Google Sheets. It has been published. I'll talk about it a bit more. All of our faculty now get their own personal team in Microsoft Teams where they have a spreadsheet just like this. that gets them to think about, for every assignment that they have, for example, a weekly lab, a midterm exam, practice quizzes, a paper, to think about when it's due, a bit about what that assignment entails, the learning outcomes that it taps into, and then adjustments that would just be easy to do, right? I'm not going to grade everything in one night. If a student needs 3 days, just give them the 3 days. Don't even ask me, right? Maybe instead of having multiple versions of an assessment, if I'm assessing something 7 times, because we know the value of repeated assessment, I'm going to say of those 7 times, I'm only going to count 4. So you can set up on cue to drop the lowest marks. It doesn't matter to me if it's a 60% or a 0%, I'm going to drop it. Right? So we can build in flexibility that way, in a way that doesn't necessarily put more burden on the instructor, and we can let the technology handle those drops for us. What we have in this table, and again, I'm happy to share it, are what we see as common accommodation requests, so that we can get instructors thinking in advance about what they're most likely to encounter. So requires extra time on a quiz, give it, doesn't matter, the exams office is going to deal with it anyway, check, done, feels really good. Requires a week or less extension, requires more than a week's extension, leniency for spelling grading, oral presentations. It's also really helpful when instructors think about this in advance, because when you get a student in front of you, you're not thinking. It's reducing opportunity for bias because you've already thought through this. Can't participate in classroom discussions. Anyway, it goes on. Note that this is just one intervention to support accessibility. It's not going to address all barriers. It's intended for a starting point for instructors. It's a great tool for those of you in large courses where you have a TA, because your TA then can go to this spreadsheet that's already been pre-populated and said, hey, Dr. Norris, just letting you know, I went to your spreadsheet, the student needed this. I just gave it to them because you already gave the green light for it. Great. You're empowering people to have control at the front line, and you're also reducing your burdens. But like I mentioned with the notes, one of the things I was curious about is, does it work? So we piloted this, where we asked students about their experience of what we were calling central support, it's in psychology, versus going through instructors. Students preferred going through central support, and they found it easier to navigate, and they just generally preferred it. Instructors overwhelmingly prefer this model. So I want to highlight, for those of you supporting courses, getting an instructor to think in advance deeply about accessibility, they prefer. I don't know that they would frame it that way, but I'm framing it that way. By doing what we should be doing in terms of thinking through, we can reduce those stresses in time pressure, high emotion contexts. It is really important that we don our own masks before we support many others. Again, this is just one method that we've used. It's not going to solve all the problems, but we are stronger when finding solutions together and evaluating for efficacy. I'm going to argue that as you think about systems and what you can change, you want to get students involved. I'm biased. I work with the greatest students on campus, sorry. But I've worked with students who really cared about accessibility through tuition. They wrote a book. They're working with school boards in Toronto. They built curriculum. I'm not on this is them. I had students just this spring publish a book, a handbook, a short handbook, because they were like, Meghan, your book's too long, about career paths in psych. I've gone on CBC with students to talk about generative AI and concerns. I've worked with students in terms of using mentorship for career discovery. working to improve tools to take attendance. These are all students doing this stuff because they care. They built an open access tool to support students in peer review. You have a group of folks who know the barriers and who are really committed. This is not all on you. We can really leverage a motivated group to help us with some of these barriers that we're seeing. So I encourage you to think about what would help in your context. I talked a lot about my context, but we all have different contexts. What can you do to help it? I'm noticing so many typos, guys. It's a week before classes. I'm gonna, please be kind. If you don't know what you can do, I want you to look around this room. These are the people you want to be talking to. These are the people who care and who are excited and who are motivated and who have probably been through it. Again, veterans, wave your hands because you are the people who will have the institutional knowledge. And then also I really want to encourage you to intentionally assess for efficacy because we all have biases going into things. I've been wrong more than I've been right. But because we collect the data, we know, and we can keep building in the right direction. So to wrap all of that up, higher education matters. We are at a challenging time in our sector, in lots of sectors. To ensure that post-secondary is sustainable and accessible because it matters, there's a real critical need for thoughtful considerations of resources and demands in a variety of ways, operationally, human-centered, thinking about our workforce. We have to be real and honest, and we have to be compassionate. We need to move from crisis to innovation. This is the time to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. We have to innovate and then share what we're learning. And again, teamwork makes the dream work. I really think that only by sharing and talking to each other and building together can we move this forward. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Wow. Does anyone have a question?
I recognize I was all over the map. Remember I told you I could go deeper, I could hit a bazillion things? I went a bazillion. But there were puppies. Yeah?
Do you have an advice for accommodations when you work a lot with the teams, especially engineering and some Mondays?
Yeah, accommodations when you work with teams. This is actually, I'm happy to share resources. So I do a lot of teamwork and innovation work in a seminar course with students in psych. As part of that work and in terms of teaching the team skill, I have an open access spreadsheet that they're all required to complete that talks about task assignment, and it's not widget tasks, like it's actually not easily divisible, so it's challenging, and they have to come up with plan A, B, C, and D. So what happens if this person, and I don't talk about accessibility in any healthcare, I say what happens if somebody's dog dies? What happens if this does not get done for any reason? And then we do talk about also social loafing. So what happens if somebody just kind of flakes off for the term? So I don't think we even need to talk about accessibility unless there is a real functional impairment that we can address. So for example, the red-green, I recently had a student who was red-green colorblind, and she was like, if anybody sends me something in red-green, I'm gonna lose my mind. And so we actually, it was like a funny joke. We were like, do not do red-green, she's gonna blow up. So if there's a functional impairment or a functional limitation, that can be worked in. Nobody has to disclose why, right? It could be I can't come in early in the morning because I'm on a varsity team and I've got to practice. The why doesn't matter, we focus on the what. And then by having a plan A, B, C, and D for contingency, I find that really helps in terms of team. And then also facilitating the commitment to that. So students generate it, it comes to me, and then if there's challenges, I intervene. But I think, again, a priori, thinking it through.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Okay, I have a question because I have always wondered about this, and I would love to hear your take on it. Say you have 7 things and you're going to drop the lowest 2. Can you explain a little bit about the equity? Because one of the questions that I always get is for students who get the flu and they miss one, but their best friend and they're both competing for the 99%. They go, well, my friend got an extra attempt at it. And so they get really how do you explain that to the high achievers, i.e. who I used to be?
It is really hard. It is really hard. When I have flexible drop policies, it's one reason I drop more than one, to be honest, because everybody gets a get out of flu free card, let's say. And if somebody is sick, the way I think about it, to be honest, is I work out a percentage mark. And so X percentage of work has to be done, I drop the rest. So let's say I need 75% of the work done. And a student says, well, I wasn't able to do the 75%, or I say, well, then maybe this isn't the best time for the course. And so maybe it's not 75%, maybe it's 50% of the work or whatever, but you can say, I think it's fair to say in an on-campus course or any course, engaging in the work at this determined level is required for consideration in this course. Yeah. And then also, and this is just me, and I get it's not satisfying to everybody, is lots of people have lots of good reasons for completing things or not. And you know what, sometimes somebody has a cold and it's not gonna be their best work. I'd rather them do all or something and try and have a drop. So in Psych 100, one of the things we talk a lot about is all or something. Do not all or nothing this course because it will catch you up with you. All or something. If you can only spend 5 minutes reading the book this week, read the intros. That's way better than nothing. So trying to encourage students to engage that way. Again, it's not satisfying to everybody, but yeah. I will say that thinking though, in terms of how much needs to be completed, comes back to that a priori thinking in terms of what is the essential requirement for this course. And maybe you only need to see one demonstration of a skill. So maybe you're gonna have 10 assessments and only one's gonna count. It's kind of up to you to determine in terms of how much, but that happens early. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great presentation, I learned so much. I was thinking about you metacognitively talking us through some of your thinking and why you do this and that, and how often do you, or how much do you explain the design of your course to your students? Do you do that at the beginning of the year or of course?
I wish I could explain more of it in Psych 100, but we only have one 50-minute lecture a week and one 50-minute lab, and we have content that we have to cover. All of the TAs in Psych 100 get extensive training on the course design and the background and how we think about these things and flexible design, so they feel comfortable in terms of the delivery, and if they have issues, they can ask questions, and if in the lab students have questions, they're well positioned to answer. In an upper year course where I have a bit more time and space, I do talk about it a lot with students. And ongoing, it's not a one and done because nobody's paying attention the first week of class when you talk about the syllabus. Sorry for new instructors. Template those email responses. But yeah, it's an ongoing conversation. And the reality is we all need accessibility and consideration at some point, right? Already I'm looking at my term and I have to be off campus, so I'm not gonna be in the classroom, and what am I gonna do? Because I still have a commitment to my students. Just like if my students aren't there, they still have a commitment to the course, and maybe it's gonna look different, or maybe it's gonna be a drop or whatever. But I really try as much as I can to put the competition out and talk about our commitments to the course. But it's easier to do in a small upper year course.